Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, and I'm very excited to have Yanik Silver with us. Yanik has been called a cosmic catalyst, a maverick mischief maker, and a galactic goofball. He redefines how business is played in the 21st century at the intersection of evolutionary growth, impact, and fun. Yanik is the creator of the Cosmic Journal, author of Evolved Enterprise, and the founder of Maverick 1000, a global collective of visionary entrepreneurs making a serious difference in the world without taking themselves too seriously. In fact, it's not unusual to find him dressed as a lemur, a showgirl, or even in matching mermaid tails with Sir Richard Branson. Yanik, it's so great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Stephan. Appreciate it.
So you started your journey as an entrepreneur and as a mischief maker. When and how? Like, did you start like with the proverbial lemonade stand as a little kid, and then build a small empire by the time you were 20, or what? How did this all unfold for you?
Well, I was lucky enough, didn't feel like I was lucky at the time, but lucky enough to have a really big head start because our family immigrated from Russia. We came over when I was 3 years old. And then my dad ended up starting his own company, medical equipment, sales and service, because he was essentially going to get fired from his hospital job because he was moonlighting on the side. And he took the path that many of us do, which is that path not as well taken, that you're just responsible for yourself as an entrepreneur. And so I grew up in the family business. So at 14, I was telemarketing for latex gloves. At 16, the only way I got a car was if I went out and cold called doctors. And so I got a really early education in marketing and sales. And very early on, I wasn't very good at it. And I realized that cold calling really sucked. But then I had a doctor who gave me a Jay Abraham tape, and it really turned the lights on about direct response marketing and this whole idea that, wow, you could write an ad and have people, in this case, doctors, respond. And so it really changed that company from a little regional player to a national player. And then I kind of went on from there.
Jay Abraham, has he made a lasting impact on you and how you do not just marketing but overall business?
Well, Jay, he was definitely the first person that I ever got introduced to. And I think some of his ideas have really continue to be foundational for the things that I do. One of my favorites was this idea of like a host beneficiary is what he would call it. And so for me, even to this day, I think my greatest leaps have been in partnerships, but it's figuring out how do you create something that other people are not just a win for them, but I think of it as the ultimate win, like a win-win-win-win-win. How do you make them look like a greater hero to the people that they want to look like a hero to? And then also, how do you gather them up in small circles or communities and create these alliances that they could do something together that they couldn't do on their own? And so kind of taking his concepts, I think, a little bit even further than what he's thought about there. But so, yeah, it's been absolutely foundational in many ways.
Yeah. So who are some of the other important and impactful people in your life that you've never even potentially met, perhaps, but ones who have influenced your life significantly? I'd love to hear who
Sure.
they are.
I think that your life changes through the books you read or material you study, the people you meet, and the experiences that you have, and that's what I've really helped optimize for and continue to. So very early on, it was all related to marketing, direct response marketing. So people like, not as well known maybe, but Ted Nicholas, who's an incredible mail order person and also just an incredible gentleman, someone who I reached out to, before I had any sort of success or name recognition or whatever you might call it. And he responded back and was just such a gentleman. And then many years later, just a great, like, kind of full circle moment where he and I are teaching copywriting together at one of my events. And it's just really, really powerful. So, I love finding people and then going back to who were their influences and then who were their influences. So when I was learning and studying marketing and advertising, it was like going back to really, really random people, like a guy named Robert Ruxton, who wrote Printed Salesmanship, who I would assume one out of, 10,000 marketers might even know who that is. And so mail order people, so like that, like contemporaries of Claude Hopkins and others like that, I'd study everything I possibly could. I learned from Earl Nightingale, talking about mentors in audio form. I would have all these tapes in and around my car, and so I played ice hockey, and all my buddies are in my car. They're like, "What the hell are you? What are these things?" And I'm like, "Oh, don't worry, you're not going to like these." But I learned from him the concept of, if you want to study for 1 hour or 2 hours a day, you can become an expert in that subject for within 3 years, or a world class expert in 5 years. And I'm like, well, what happens if you study 2 hours a day or 3 hours a day? And so many of those people, it's just like going deeper and deeper and deeper. So it was, Dan Kennedy was another one for sure. Eugene Schwartz, some of the other mail order guys. Maxwell Sackheim is a big one. And so David Ogilvy, John Caples, a lot of those, original advertising people that I learned from. And then it turned into more of like the Wayne Dyers of the world, and Earl Nightingale and Jim Rohns and so forth. And again, got a really early step at this at 17, 18, listening to all that kind of material and then continuing to apply it.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually had Dan Kennedy. Well, I had Jay Abraham on this podcast. Dan Kennedy was also a guest on the show as well.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
I mean, I worked with Dan for many, many years. He certainly, was someone that was absolutely foundational in helping me move from, where I was working with my dad's business, helping them in the marketing side, and kind of opening up that door and that idea that, okay, there's a higher leverage that could be done. So I've been, some of my doctor clients were like, oh, you're pretty good at marketing. Can you help me? So then that turned into me helping them market their practice and so forth. And there's only a limited amount of time you can do consulting work. So he was instrumental in helping, saying, okay, here's how you could package this up and sell it as information and content. And, literally I'm answering my phone underneath my desk in my dad's office. But it allowed me to move out of there. And that was a hard decision, leaving that company where I thought I was going to kind of take it over. And my dad thought that too, but I'm like, no, there's a bigger thing. And I always talk about, like, following your heart is never wrong, but frequently scary. And there's these moments that you continue to make these leaps and you don't know exactly where you're going, but your intuition and your heart and these other nudges come along. And I even call it a cosmic alarm clock. And anyone has probably had multiple times this cosmic alarm clock. And it's something like a little voice that gets louder and louder, and you either hit snooze or you can answer it. And typically it's going to require you to do something different than what you've ever done before. And but it is going to create these giant leaps for you.
Yeah. So let's distinguish for our listener, what is a cosmic alarm clock in terms of it being different from regular intuition, or that still small voice and the nudges that you get from above? Like how is this cosmic alarm clock different? Because it sounds more urgent than just an intuitive hit.
Well, and it usually comes from these feelings that you're getting of either frustration or depression, or just not feeling like you're really fulfilling what you're meant to be doing. And then this, I think of it as this little voice that continues sort of nudging at you, and it's like, there's something more, or what's next, or what are you really meant to be doing, and then it's examining, what is truly your greatest work in the world, and what does that look like? So a lot of times we have like little whiffs of it, or like just little hits of what it could be, but answering the cosmic alarm clock usually equals taking a bigger leap in some way and trusting. So I have this little sign on my desk that says, trust the universe has even more in store for you than you can imagine. And that came from me journaling at sunrise on Necker Island this one time there. And that's really been one of my kind of guiding principles of continuing to lean forward and see what shows up.
Yeah. So do you feel like it needs to be a dark night of the soul, or some sort of depression, or feeling lost before you get the wake up call? Or can you just proactively say, all right, I'm going to make a shift, and I don't need a light under, or fire under my butt in order to do it?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. So I think of this notion of the universe continues to sort of bonk you on the head harder and harder.
Yeah.
And so if I look back, so if you think about this, you got your you got joy here at the top, and joy is kind of like what is leading you forward. And when you're connected to that, and then you have your guardrails, which are pain, and pain are they could be really wide, and that's where you get these dark nights of the soul, and these could be health issues, financial issues, relationship issues that are really big, and but they're all moving you continually forward. But if you are more in alignment, so I talk about your head, your heart, your higher purpose. If you're more in alignment, then it's going to be a much smoother sort of transition in that way. And if you're also proactively creating time for, checking in with yourself, we can talk about journaling a little bit later as one of those practices, but also having, bigger moments where could be retreats or moments of silence and so forth, where you're just really checking in. I don't think you necessarily need that dark night of the soul, but I think for so many people, that is what's needed, because that's kind of forcing them to make that big difference. And it all depends. It depends on what you kind of signed up for and what you've got going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or how stubborn you are even.
Well, and also like if it's become urgent and important enough for you to make the shift, it might be one of those someday maybe sort of things until finally you get enough pain or like, all right, I got to do this.
Right.
Somebody who's
Yeah. And
perhaps
this
even
moment,
like Joe Polish talks about this publicly about how he had to hit rock bottom
right.
with his addiction, and now he's changing so many people's lives, but he couldn't even save his own life until he hit that rock bottom so that he could snap out of it. And it took a lot, but that sometimes that pain is the best medicine that you can possibly get.
Absolutely. And it's and then it's also, what is the meaning that you create out of it, right? So we as humans are very much meaning making machines. So it's like, what is that why that's created out of it? So when so moving from my dad's business, I moved into the internet marketing space, and back in 2000, and I thought I was actually late to the game and did really well there, selling my own products. And then other people are like, "Oh, how did you do that? Could you teach me?" So that turned into a whole nother career that I didn't expect, of helping them take their information and knowledge and so forth. And then about 12, 13 years ago, I just asked, am I happy? Would I be happy doing what I'm doing 10 years from now? And when I was really honest, especially in my journal, the answer was no. And so, like everything before that, I'm like, oh, well, great. I'll just follow my intuition and joy here, and I'll just create something that became Maverick, which was, we would go off on these amazing adventures and go Baja racing in Mexico and go fly, make jets or do whatever, and bring entrepreneurs on there, plus have a charity element, plus have a business element where we do sessions in the middle of nowhere and so forth. So I'm like, yeah, this is amazing. But about $400,000 in, my wife's like, so what the hell are you doing? And so there was a decent level of pain there. And then it took really just examining, like, what is my why? And the why wasn't to build an adventure travel company. It was to change the way business is played. And then it took like a lot of reflection, because what was working before didn't work anymore. And it was really felt like the game had changed on me, where, I could easily have gone back to what I was doing in the digital marketing space and kind of having golden handcuffs in a way, but that didn't feel like I was growing or expanding in any way. And it was really painful, especially when you connect as a successful entrepreneur, quote unquote, you have that identity wrapped in that aspect as well. So, and when you're a little bit more public facing as well, it's more difficult to make those transitions. And so it really forced me to look at what is it. And so I use kind of an interesting technique. I'll use left-handed writing. So my non-dominant hand, and I learned this from a guy named Bill Donius, who wrote Thought Revolution, which is a really
I know
cool,
Bill. Yes, I've had him on this podcast.
Oh, you know Bill? Oh, great. Okay, yeah. So you know that process, and so and I've taken it and expanded it quite a bit, and I love it. But I asked myself, what would my 111-year-old self tell me? And it was, light 1,000 suns who can each light another 1,000 suns. And then that became the real impetus for what we were doing with Maverick, and changed it from Maverick Business Adventures to Maverick 1,000. This idea of like 1,000. So one entrepreneur could change an industry, but 1,000 suns could really change the world. And it changed everything. Like we started, I had this intuitive hit that we should be in 2012 in the Mayan Riviera. to do our summit. And my team's like, are you crazy? Like that's, 3 days before Christmas for solstice. I'm like, no, we should go there. And they're like, okay. And we were in this sweat lodge, a Mayan sweat lodge called Temescal. And just like all these things started opening up that were completely different than what we were doing before, but really we're on the right track. And I find that these synchronicities and these magic moments start showing up when we are on that right track. And that's kind of the way, it was one of the ways that the universe kind of continues to give us feedback.
Yeah. You said so much here. Let's unpack a little bit of this. For
Sure.
our listener who's not really that woo-woo, let's explain for them what a synchronicity is and what an intuitive hit is, because those can be very marginalized terms and a little too new agey for some folks. And that used to be me, frankly, until I had my own awakening. But everybody's taking things at their own pace and they've got their own journey. So if somebody who's not on the train yet for like, oh yeah, I get guidance from above all the time. How does this show up? And how do you know that it's not just, I don't know, your own instinct, subconscious mind, imagination, like synchronicities, intuitive hits? What the heck is this stuff?
Yeah, good questions. So intuition for me, it's interesting. I've spent a lot of time with some interesting icons, and they very frequently tap into their intuition, and it's not in a woo-woo way at all. It's intuition usually comes from pattern recognition, and so that is by being able to be deeply in that field or wherever you are, or you've seen so many business ideas or opportunities, or you've seen so many different aspects of whatever it is that you do, then you start recognizing patterns. But it is intuitive, because a lot of times, you think about our language or some of the language that we've developed, it's like gut feeling. I trust my gut. Like why do we use that as one of the terms for intuition? And it's because the gut, and you can, look this up in a very scientific way, the gut contains essentially another brain. It's like an entire new neural network that we're just really understanding more and more of. So when you feel it in your gut, it's not a made up woo woo thing, but it's us getting more present in our body, and really feeling there's more subtle energies. And if you're only using this part, or even like this part, your frontal cortex only, you're really limiting yourself. And to me, the leaders that have continued to invent and reinvent and do the things that we want to see as visionary entrepreneurs use all of it. And I even talk about connecting your head, your heart, your higher purpose. So, then we can connect our heart, which is, what is the impact we want to make in the world? Our head is obviously our business side, our marketing side. And then our higher purpose is just being open to, is there something else? Whatever it is, I'm not forcing any of my own ideas or beliefs. I like it as, hey, try some stuff on and see what happens. In fact, I love experiments where you'll be like, okay, well, let's try, meditation or something else that I've wanted to try. And then you give it a go for, 21 days or 33 days or whatever it is. And then you see, and sometimes it's like, I want to exclude sugar out of my diet, or I want to take away alcohol or whatever. And then you start seeing, okay, the experiment gives us then, we have this end time, and it's like, all right, well, let's, great. Did it enhance my life or did it not enhance my life? And then you can see it's not a always and forever thing. And then, so the synchronicities, those are, it's really fascinating when you start opening up to that, because there's always going to be this pragmatic side of you that's like, well, maybe this, this could be explained away in this way or something like that. But when you start tracking them, so I'll track them in my journal, or a lot of them, or in my camera, in my phone, I'll have a different folder or something, the pictures that show up. And synchronicities are really just meaningful for you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be meaningful for anyone else. A lot of times when you're trying to explain it to someone else, they're not always like, oh, wow, I get it. But it's something that is meaningful to you, and typically a meaningful coincidence that can't really be a coincidence. I mean, it can be if you're just completely pragmatic about it. But I like, so I have this mug that I actually drink cacao out of almost every day. And there's one of my favorite Einstein quotes, which is, there are only two ways to live your life. One is though nothing is a miracle, and the other is though everything is. And so again, it's just like, how do you want to see things?
Yeah, so powerful. I love that. Well, a few thoughts on what you were saying. One is where you treat everything like an experiment and be open to seeing what the impact is. I refer to that as the willing suspension of disbelief, and as a kind of a guiding motto for my life. And it makes a huge impact. It makes all the difference when you approach
And it makes it
anything.
more fun.
Oh, it brings joy and delight to everything that happens in your life, even the stuff that's hard.
Well, I was just going to mention one super fast example about synchronicity, and then I'll let you finish that one thought. Is, like, again, these are sometimes big ones and small ones. So we were going to invite one of our videographers to come with us to Antarctica, and he's a wildlife videographer. So we're like, all right, he would love this, but let's do it in a fun way. When we invite him, let's have a penguin puppet or something like that. And literally, as my business partner and I, Sophia, are like walking down the road to go get some other stuff for our retreat, like literally as soon as we said this, like 10 steps later, I see this penguin. It's not a puppet, but it's a little plush animal penguin. And I look down, I'm like, that's a penguin, right? She's like, yep. And we're just like both laughing our ass off because it was like that fast. And so of course someone can be like, well, whatever, there's some random penguin that some kid dropped, but it's really hard to not feel like that's magical.
Oh yeah. It's especially when you start seeing the without a doubt signs. It's like, okay, that's pretty amazing. For example, a friend of mine was telling me how he had a girlfriend that her I think mom had passed, and they were going to go visit the cemetery, but only if they had time, and they were running close to not having time. So they made a quick stop at like a CVS or a Walgreens to find one of those plastic wreath things that you can stick into the ground, and they couldn't find it anywhere. They're like, okay, well, I guess let's not stop. We'll just go straight to our destination. They don't even have a wreath, and a wreath. In fact, a whole bunch of them fell right from the top shelf onto the floor of the aisle. And like, whoa, okay, well, I guess we'll stop. And here are the wreaths, so let's pick one up. So that was
I just got goosebumps as you're talking about that. That's a good one.
Oh my goodness, like the universe is magical. It is absolutely magical.
Exactly.
These synchronicities are not chance occurrences. They are ways to guide you down this beautiful path that you're on. We're all, as Ram Dass would say, we're all just walking each other home. So
yeah, and so it's fascinating when you start looking into this from a historic standpoint too, because there's lots of ways that people have used synchronicities and oracles and different intuitive connection tools to really start getting messages for themselves. And one, like as you said, the Ram Dass walking each other home. One of them is allowing, I forgot what it was called, but it was a Greek term where you would essentially plug your ears and then go into an environment where there's lots of people, lots of things going on, and the first words that you heard were the message for you. It's like a klepton or something like that. And then there's other things where you'll use a book. So that's been called like bibliomancy, where you'll have an opportunity to flip through a book and you find a message for you. That's actually the way that I use this cosmic journal. I have a couple books that I use like that, but I'll just like either just sit for a moment, or I'll just like flip it open and then see what pops up. There's also like oracle cards and things that you can use. But again, like it's going to work for certain people, but they're just really, really powerful if you're open to it. And if you're open to it, what you want to flip a page and
let's do it. Absolutely. And before you do it, I want to share one quick example. So my daughter is an SEO expert, and she's 30 years old, and she's an entrepreneur and everything. And um, she has this book from Deepak Chopra on the 7 spiritual laws of success. And I asked her
Yep.
to pull it off the shelf and to open it up, quote unquote, randomly. And when she did, it
Yeah.
was the perfect thing that she needed to hear. That was exactly about what the whole discussion was about. So this stuff is real. And if you shut your heart to it, then you're not going to see it. But if you open your heart and you're willing, again, to have this suspension of disbelief, all the magic starts to happen.
And think of it also in a playful way. Like it's a very joyful process of just like when things like that show up, there is this like, again, check in with your body. Like usually it's a pretty just exhilarating, awe-inspiring, just like I don't know, like a wow moment, an awe. And so you can see what is right. So this thing, the Cosmic Journal, so this is my latest very much random creation. It started, so I like experiments. I follow my own advice, and this is an experiment that I saw, which was a 100-day art experiment or art challenge. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot. and that's, every single day you were supposed to create a piece of art. And I'm like, so in my journal, I'm like, well, what would happen if I did it? What would happen if I didn't do it? I'm like, yeah, it'd be some sort of weird byproduct. I'm sure that would happen. And that, that's the longest I've ever done a challenge. But for me, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it 108 days. So every single night, I'm going to draw something. And what would I draw? I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to draw an illustrated page and also journal on that illustration, whatever came through me. So I'd meditate or see what came through me, or I'd go back through years of journals and redo some of them. And it was just for myself. And it was like every single time I would check off that little checkbox. It could be 2 o'clock at night, 3 o'clock at night. It was really powerful, and it felt like I was doing something. And it was never intended to be published. It was never intended to really go out to people. And then I started using it as my own sort of oracle, and I would flip it open after about 50 or 60 pages, and I'd be like, "Oh, this is really fascinating." Like the right message would come through. So I really wrote it for myself. And so when I hand it to people, I say, "This is the galactic instruction manual you've been missing when you were born to fulfill your destiny here." And one of my friends saw it. He paid for me to publish like this little special edition vegan version. And then I got a meeting through a friend to read Tracy at Hay House, and I showed it to him. He flipped it open. He's like, "All right, I've never seen anything like this." And so that's what this became. So let's flip it open, or you can pick a page number between 3 and 189, however you want to do it. I'll let you
67.
pick. 67. All right. All right. So this is the page. And then, Stephan, I'll send you this actual image if you want to include in the show notes or anything like that.
For sure.
And this is actually fun. We have a synchronicity here on the left-hand side too, and I'll tell you about it in a second. So this says "Embrace fully." It's a picture of Ganesha, and says Ganesha is the remover and placer of obstacles. What if any obstacle you encountered is really there to steer you in the right direction you needed to go? How different would you look at them? Sometimes we're blocked and frustrated, but realize how that was the best for us. Ultimately, from an elevated view, all paths lead to the same place. Your return path to true re-remembrance, embrace fully each potential roadblock, obstacle, frustration, or setback as a way to recalibrate towards your true destination of destiny. And when you're in alignment and attuned to that place, allow Ganesh to then become the remover of obstacles. Say yes to it all, fully embrace everything with wonder, awe, appreciation, grace to navigate the dream unfolding. So pretty good as we're talking about, do we need a rock bottom moment or any of these things? So not many people really realize, so Ganesh is that a lot of times known as the deity of removing obstacles and of great fortune and happiness, but not everyone really knows that also considered a placer of obstacles. And you look back at your life and you're like, okay, could there be these obstacles that were there that were moving me into the right direction? And that's the way, I always bring meaning to anything that shows up as an obstacle.
So this is very much what I needed to hear. So I'll provide the context around this. The last call I had right before we started this interview was with a recruiter who was referred to me from a fellow Genius Network member. Great guy. And I need a recruiter because I'm looking for a COO. I had a COO that I hired in February, and it didn't work out. He's now on to his next opportunity. He's taken another full-time job elsewhere, and he's a friend, and I'm, there's only good feelings both ways. But this is an opportunity. It was a disappointment. It was a challenge. It was an obstacle that it didn't work out, and then he took another job. Okay, that's something I just have to get through. But in actuality, it is a wonderful gift because the right person is somebody who can run an agency, or the operations side of an agency, because I have an SEO agency, and can see the future of where we're heading to be more in the woo-woo space, to have kind of like a media company and a personal development self-help book, which I'm working on currently, and all this sort of stuff that's very much a significant pivot. But still, we're going to do agency work, so it's not like we're going to step into this new world and leave the old world behind. We're going to stay in both worlds. So I need a pretty special person to fill this role of COO. And I just had this magical connection, this recruiter and I know my gut, my guides, my guidance, my intuition tells me that he's the one who's going to connect me with this perfect match. Unless, of course, this perfect match is actually listening to this podcast and wants to contact.
Right.
That's possible too. But that message that you just delivered for me, which wasn't on page 66, it wasn't on page 68, it was on page 67, and I was waiting for
on page 67.
Yeah, yep. I waited for the response. I actually get these intuitive hits, psychic messages, etc. And if you would have told me this a year ago, I'd be like, yeah, whatever. People change, things change. We get awakened, and so yeah, that was really, really helpful because it was an obstacle for my benefit. And
yeah, exactly. And now you have space for the perfect COO.
Yeah, and before I had the COO that I had this year, I had nobody for the last 10 years since my previous company that I exited from, that I sold in 2010. I have not had a COO. I have not had a number two. And this was really a wonderful shift for me to know that I could step back, and it was like training wheels. I was like, oh yeah, I can do this. I can do this again. That's right. That's how it feels to have a COO. I forgot. And now I'm ready to take the training wheels off and to embrace this magic of, okay, here's an obstacle that's going to keep you. It's like you're at the bowling alley and you got bumpers on and you're just learning how to bowl, and the bumpers
are there to help. Exactly right. And then the additional synchronicity that I was going to mention. So on the left-hand pages of this, so you can kind of see here, there's very few pages that have this. So each left-hand page has something different, but this says text a friend roulette. And it says, send this entry to a friend and see what happens, or tell them you were inspired to send this to them as an answer to something they're working on. And it says, bonus, try someone you haven't seen in 6 months. So, you start playing with these things and playing with synchronicities, and then you see what happens and what shows up back. So we've had people, take that and then they'll send it off to someone and see what happens. And that it all starts intermingling and being interconnected.
Yeah. Yeah. I know just the person to send it to. I was given that intuitive hit as you were talking. And it's Anthony Capobianco,
there you go.
Who was a guest on Get Yourself Optimized. And the most discussed topic of that episode was synchronicities.
I love it. Yeah, I mean that's one of my favorite topics. I mean, I love Carl Jung's another. You talk about inspirations. I have an entire new suite of inspirations and people that I've learned from in the last 10, 15 years. But and Jung is certainly one of them.
Yeah.
He was a fascinating character where he was wrestling with this idea of his professional life and his spiritual life, and he even the book that he's got many books, but one is a Red Book, which is this huge oversized volume. I don't know if you've seen it, which came to him as these really channeled works that he would paint. And he was a very good artist. And he would paint all these things, and he didn't want it released until after he died, because he thought it would just, discredit him in his professional world.
Yeah. Yeah. You spoke about this earlier, that as a public facing person, it can be really hard to make this transition to go from the empirical, scientific, tangible realm to the woo-woo, to the metaphysical, to the spiritual, to the ethereal. And you get
Well, any
marginalized,
transition,
discredited, ostracized, ridiculed. It can get really ugly. You make yourself a target for some people. Although you can choose
yeah.
not to. You can choose to not have that energy of being a target, and I would recommend that.
There you go. Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And I think it's when you're making this, like, so right now we are in this. I study a lot of different ancient cultures and philosophies, and actually, there, so the book the Cosmic Journal was never created with a page by page in mind. It was just like whatever I was inspired to do, and so forth. And then when my friend Eric Lochtefeld's like, all right, well, I'll invest to make this little vegan version of it for you that you really want. And so then I had to create the actual, what is the arc of it? And there's a real arc to it now. So, like page 1 starts with the very beginning. And then at the end of it, we go into this notion of like where the world is heading, and this very cyclical notion of, people have heard about the Golden Age and then Silver Age, and then the Bronze Age and Iron Age. And a lot of people mostly believe that history is like this. It's very linear, and it just like continues getting better and better, and technology gets better, etc. But there's a lot of credence to a very cyclical nature of history, and this is where, so a lot of cultures, especially Mayans, if there's a reason they had 13 calendars that they were that they were keeping track of, and so there's roughly this 26,000 year, science would say it's only precession, but these other cultures would talk about these periods of darkness and light. And we are in this period of ascending consciousness, because we're actually in a different place in the universe. And so it's, fascinating. And so right now people are being awakened, they're nudged, or having their cosmic alarm clock go off, because of, there's a greater purpose to what they are being called to. And it's not forgetting everything else, right? Like it's like, how do we incorporate all of that? And that becomes the ground floor for what's next.
Yeah. Yeah. And something I heard, I forget where, but recently, is that if you choose not to ascend, that's fine. We're all taking our own path, right? But if you choose not to ascend and go to a new Earth, the fifth dimension, or however it's referred to in your circles, but the idea is you can choose to then stay here in the 3D world and process back down towards more of a Middle Ages. It's not going to jump; it's going to actually proceed to darker, 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 and then like a procession. And that's a long, hard row for you to hoe. And if you choose, you can do that. But I choose the ascension path.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think that it's happening regardless, and it's from this. I mean, you just look around, right? Like, so I've been meditating now for about 8 years or so, pretty regularly. But if you would have asked me before, like there's no way I thought I could meditate, because I had a million ideas a minute, and so I've had some great mentors and people that have come along, And again, that experiment, like try that experiment. And so if I ask groups of entrepreneurs I work with now, like, do you meditate? Like almost 60, 70% of the hands will go up. And it's completely different than a decade ago where it might've been 10%. And to me, that's like a leading indicator of something happening. And you don't have to, like, this is not a distinction that you have to meditate in order to be enlightened and this ascension like you're talking about. But it is one of the leading indicators because it allows you to connect deeper and to more subtle energies and so forth. Yeah. And there's lots of other mindfulness practices. And then, some people are going at it from a much more pragmatic, technological aspect of it, where they might have like the headband on that, or the binaural beats and other things. And I like all of these things. I like, you're probably around my age-ish. Do you remember the cartoon Voltron?
Vaguely. I mean, I'm 50, so I don't.
Yeah, it was like the mechanical lions that would all come together, and then they would form Voltron, the defender of the universe. It's kind of an obscure cartoon. It was a Japanese cartoon, but then got a little bit bigger. There's actually a new version on Netflix that's been pretty good. That they came out a couple of years ago. But I think of like all these different traditions and all these different methodologies, like all having a piece of the bigger secret. And right now it's like, okay, we're in this beautiful opportunity to be like, oh, well, this makes sense for me and this makes sense for me. And some people just go on one path and that's great for them too, but they all lead to the same place. And we have this really beautiful chance to, almost have a buffet of all these opportunities. And of course, now you can get lost on only, just picking a little bit over here, and never going deep enough to really see any movement. But, everyone, like you were talking about the guardrails on the bowling alley. So you all end up in the same spot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's the most important thing is to listen and to communicate with your higher power. And if you choose one modality over another, you choose one spiritual discipline over another, one religion over another, that's really of no consequence at the end of the day. It's really about having that dialogue with the creator directly. And meditation is listening, whereas praying is speaking. So if you only pray, it's a one-way conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think of like all those, it's like, what is the conscious intention, right? So you're born into some sort of, I don't know, could be a religion, could be whatever it is. Obviously, you're inheriting your beliefs typically from your parents or those that are closest around you, your friends and peer group. And then also even like all the ancestors, like there's also been very much scientific proof that you inherit traumas and things that are from multiple generations. So it's fascinating. But to me, all of it is about exploration and then consciously deciding, okay, what do I believe in? And then also having that direct connection, like you're talking about, to source, to God, to whatever it is, and not having an intermediary. And so this is also why it's been becoming really much bigger now, is a lot of plant medicines, a lot of entheogens, a lot of things like that. But again, those are not the only path, but it's another catalyst that opens up new ways of being like, oh, this is really, really interesting.
Yeah. You got to be careful though, because so all of them if you do this without the proper guidance and preparation, you could end up with a psychic break or some sort of psychosis. And it's just, it's not to be treated lightly.
Yeah, right. Exactly right. You can't treat it lightly at all. You have to go in with a reverence and understanding. And just like anything, it's like, is there a calling for you to explore it, instead of being like, oh, I'm going to check off the box. Right, I'm going to go, everyone's doing this, I should go do it, or whatever. It's got to be a right one for you as well.
Yeah.
So I have a couple quick, easy ones that can help you bring more awareness and really connect in that way. And so one of my favorites is always journaling. I don't know if you're a journaler or not, Stephan.
I do. Yeah.
It's like it's one of my favorite processes. I think of it as like a foundational success principle. I've done it for a long time, and I remember Jim Rohn talking about it, that the most successful people journal, and it's just like, and then you want to get a journal that you actually feel really great about writing in. And he's like, I'm looking for the most expensive journal, is what he would say. And he's like, they don't always make them, but I my thoughts are worth it. And so this idea of capturing that moment, and so many people are kind of have some adverse reactions to it because they're like, well, what if someone reads it, or someone finds it, or how honest do I want to be in my journal, and all these things. And you can lock it up, you can hide it, you can do all sorts of things, but there's been scientific proof that you actually become happier by journaling because it creates a beginning, a middle, and an end on that page. And again, those experiments. So I like, just give yourself a window of time and say, okay, I'm gonna give it a go and see what happens. And typically when I start writing, what I start writing about isn't the same thing I end writing about. It's just a process of getting going. And I'll do it before I knock off for the day so I can process my day. And it's just a really, really powerful way of seeing what's going on in your inner world, but also like working on ideas. What are you grateful for? All sorts of things in your journal. And then you can use it in lots of other unusual and expanded ways, like we were talking about, like, conversations with your left hand, or your non-dominant hand, or even like I'll have back and forth conversations with different archetypes, and even like my 111-year-old self, or my 11-year-old self, or even the universe. And that's
You can also do
um
automatic writing. You can do automatic dictation. Yeah, there
yeah.
are lots of opportunities once you have a pen or a stylus in hand, and you're ready to go. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think there is a big difference. People are like, "Oh, can I just do this on my computer or laptop?" I'm like, "No, it does. It's not the same. It's not the same neural pathways." And so having that pen, the stylus works, or at least I believe it works, if it's a same kind of handwriting kind
It
of
works.
aspect.
It works. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've done
yeah,
automatic writing with it, and I use a Remarkable tablet. I really love that thing.
yeah, 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 yeah. So as long as it's
Yeah.
handwriting, not typing it, I think it totally
Yeah,
works.
the
I'm
Remarkable
with you.
tablet's amazing, and it has a feature to OCR, but I actually never use the OCR feature. I like to see it in my own handwriting, whatever I've written
Yep.
6 months ago or two.
And you go back, you think about synchronicities. I will typically go back a lot of times in my journal. Like I'll flip it open. I'm like, all right, what do I need to know? And I'll see something that I wrote before. I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. Or oh, I didn't realize, that was a struggle that I had, but now it's not a big deal. And that also brings more resilience for you because you're like, oh, well, I know I can get through whatever is going through right now too.
Wow, that's really powerful and profound. Thank you for that. I just like the lights went on for that because I never applied the principle of bibliomancy to my journal writings in my Remarkable tablet, and I need to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. Give it
Wow,
give it a try.
that's
And
amazing.
and I'd also go. Yeah, I also go back to specific dates. I'm like, okay, what's going on my birthday 3 years ago or whatever, and so there's a lot of things that you can do to really make that a record for yourself that you can keep, learning from yourself. Really,
Yeah, amazing. Well, I know we're out of time here. I would love for you to just share for a brief moment your Mavericks program because as I mentioned before we started recording, I'm a connoisseur of fine masterminds, and I'm very seriously
yeah,
considering Mavericks. I would love to hear a very short pitch of Mavericks for our listener too, because
yeah,
it can be very life changing.
sure.
Genius Network for me has been such a life changing thing, and I have a feeling that Mavericks is along the similar vein.
Yeah, absolutely. So Maverick, again, was started that 12, 13 years ago from that, really scratching my own itch and answering that one question. And it's evolved quite a bit. And it's for entrepreneurs that are 7, 8, 9-figure entrepreneurs who have had success, are successful, and are looking at either they're either aligned on their vision and want support to go there faster, further, or they are thinking about what's next and that support there. So we combine growth, impact, and fun. So how do you grow yourself? How do you grow your business? How do you impact the world individually through your company or companies, and collectively through our own brain power and resources and networking coming together, and then having some fun? Like it's not, why do it if it's not fun? So we take all three of those in equal measure, and especially the fun we take pretty seriously with different themes and costume parties and all sorts of stuff. And we do everything from we spent a week on Necker Island with Richard Branson with a really incredible group, to all the way to going to Haiti and building self-sustaining villages, though political climate's changed there. So we haven't been there in a little bit, but and different retreats and experiences.
Amazing.
So that's available at maverick1000.com. You can check that out. We also have a really cool upcoming Antarctica trip that we're going with the group. And then, if anyone wants to just kind of explore some of these other topics, I would check out cosmicjournal.com or on Amazon or Hay House and check that out, or the book Evolved Enterprise, to just think about how you can make a greater impact in the world.
Yep. Or your Oracle deck too, and all the above.
Yeah, the Oracle deck is really, really fun too. I always wanted an Oracle deck, and that was part of the contract with Hay House, and it was a great process to put that together, because the journal itself works like an Oracle. So it was an interesting way of being like, oh, well, how am I going to make this thing different? So there's journal prompts and all sorts of things that are part of it, and plus there's archetypes that we're talking about to have conversations with. So they're pretty cool. They're definitely really, really neat.
That's awesome. And I love how you just
Yeah.
embrace the pivot and you're like, I am no longer defined as an internet marketer. I'm a sun lighting 1,000 suns, lighting 1,000 other suns each. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for who
Yeah.
you
Thanks.
are and for what you bring to the world.
Yeah. Well, looking forward to hopefully seeing you at one of our experiences and events, and really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And thank you, listener. We'll catch you on the next episode. This is your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.